Karen stormed toward my front door, screaming at me for breaking HOA rules. Within minutes, the cops arrived, but Karen had no idea what was about to unfold. Karen had been on edge all week. Her obsession with HOA rules was legendary in our neighborhood, but today she seemed unstoppable. I was unloading groceries when I saw her storming down my driveway, waving a clipboard like a sword. "You're in violation," she yelled. "I'm calling the cops." The words barely registered before my phone buzzed in my pocket. Sure enough, a neighbor had already texted me, "Karen is heading your way, brace yourself." I tried to reason with her. "Karen, it's just a mailbox. I painted it the approved color last month." Her face contorted with rage. "That's not the approved shade. You've been warned before. This time I'm not playing games." Before I could respond, she was already marching back to her car to make the call. Moments later, flashing lights appeared down the street. Police vehicles rolled up, tires squealing softly against the asphalt. The first officer, a young woman with a calm, professional demeanor, stepped out and approached Karen. "Ma'am, we received a complaint. Can you explain?" Karen pointed at me like I was a criminal. "He's defying HOA rules." The officer's eyes flicked to me, then back at Karen. "Sir, can you step outside so we can talk?" I opened the door and walked onto the porch, trying to stay calm. "I painted my mailbox exactly according to HOA guidelines," I explained. Karen scoffed. "Guidelines you ignore constantly." The tension in the air was so thick you could almost taste it. What Karen didn't know, though, was that the HOA president had been conducting a surprise audit of the neighborhood rules today, and he was not pleased with the chaos unfolding. As I stood there trying to explain calmly, a patrol car pulled slowly up the street, the driver's side window rolling down. The officer's eyes widened, glancing at Karen. Something was happening, but what? Karen's triumphant smile faltered as she noticed the second patrol car arriving, and the person stepping out was none other than the HOA president, in handcuffs. Karen's eyes widened as the handcuffed HOA president was led toward the patrol car. The very person she'd idolized and feared for years was now a figure of authority brought low. I took a deep breath, trying not to gawk. Officer, what's happening?" The younger officer spoke up first. "Sir, ma'am, please step back. We need to handle this professionally." Karen's face turned pale, her voice trembling. This can't be. He's the HOA president." The officer ignored her. "We have an active warrant," she said, glancing at the president. "He needs to come with us." Neighbors had begun to gather, whispering, some filming on their phones. The suburban tension was palpable. I realized quickly that Karen's plan to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly. Karen, desperate to regain control, started waving her clipboard. "You don't understand. He's the one who should be enforcing the rules." The officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, please let us do our job. This isn't about you." As the HOA president was gently guided into the patrol car, Karen tried to shout something about bylaws and codes, but her voice faltered. Her power, carefully built over years of neighborhood surveillance and petty confrontations, had evaporated in an instant. I felt a surge of disbelief. Could this really be happening? Karen had called the cops to attack me, yet the person who had always seemed untouchable was now in handcuffs, under real legal authority. Karen turned toward me, a mix of fear and fury in her eyes, and whispered, "This isn't over, you'll regret this." Karen retreated to the sidewalk, still shaking. Her hands trembled as she clutched her clipboard. I tried to calm her, but she wasn't having it. "You set him up," she shouted. "This is your fault." I shook my head. "I didn't do anything. The police are handling it." "He must have." "I don't know." Her face twisted in disbelief. Karen had spent years bullying homeowners, enforcing petty rules with an iron fist, and now she realized her own hero, the HOA president, was vulnerable. Meanwhile, the officers were walking back toward their vehicles. One whispered to me quietly, "You've got a brave neighbor." Some HOA presidents, they think rules are above the law. I nodded silently. My heart raced as I realized the entire block had stopped. People peeked out windows, recorded videos on their phones, whispers traveling down the street. "Did you see the HOA president in handcuffs?" Karen stomped her foot. "You'll pay for this," she muttered. She turned, marching down the street, but I could see her faltering. Her authority, carefully crafted through fear, had cracked. The officers returned, papers in hand, giving me a quick rundown. "Just stay calm, don't interact. This will sort itself out." But Karen had other ideas. She began calling neighbors, trying to rally support. A small crowd formed, curiosity growing, tension thickening. Suddenly Karen's phone rang, she answered, and her face drained of color. The voice on the other end said something that silenced her completely. Karen's face remained frozen as she listened to the voice on the phone. I could barely hear her side of the conversation, but her gasps were audible even from the driveway. She slowly lowered the phone, staring blankly at the patrol car where the HOA president sat handcuffed. What did they say? I asked cautiously, trying not to provoke her. She shook her head violently. They found evidence against him. Real evidence. I don't believe it. It was clear, the HOA president had been hiding something Karen never suspected. Years of petty enforcement and neighborhood intimidation hadn't prepared her for the bigger, deeper truth. The officer beside me gave a small nod, confirmation that Karen's perfect world of control had cracked wide open. The crowd of neighbors grew, murmurs and whispers echoing off the suburban homes. Smartphones were raised, capturing every angle. The tension was cinematic, like a movie unfolding in real time. Karen took a step toward the patrol car, trembling but defiant. I demand to know what's happening. The officer approached, calm but firm. Ma'am, this is an ongoing investigation. You are not involved in this process. Karen's hands shook as she realized that her attempt to assert authority had utterly backfired. The person she thought was untouchable, the HOA president who had so often sanctioned her petty reign of terror, was now powerless, under real law enforcement scrutiny. Suddenly, a third officer arrived, holding a folder. Ma'am, you may want to hear this, he said and handed it to Karen. Her eyes scanned the documents. Her expression shifted from disbelief to shock, then to fury. She gasped, dropped the folder and whispered, "No, this can't be." I stepped forward cautiously. Karen, what is it? Her trembling hands clutched the empty folder. It's proof. He falsified HOA records. Fraud, misuse of HOA funds, ignoring safety violations. Everything I complained about, he was hiding it from all of us. The crowd murmured, cameras capturing her shock. Even the neighbors who had quietly resented Karen for her constant nagging now shared a sense of astonishment. The balance of power had shifted completely. The officers gently guided the HOA president toward the patrol car again, and Karen's eyes followed every step. She had spent years thinking she had control through fear and enforcement, and now her hero, and adversary, was exposed in full legal consequence. Karen's phone buzzed again. She picked it up hesitantly. The caller said just 3 words, "You're next." Karen's hand shook as she looked at me. You set him up, didn't you?" I shook my head. "I didn't do anything. The police found the evidence. That's all I know." Karen turned abruptly and began pacing, muttering. "This isn't fair. He was supposed to enforce rules, he was supposed to protect me." The officer beside me stepped in. "Ma'am, the HOA president broke the law. He is accountable. Please step back." Her eyes darted to the neighbors filming on their phones. Panic flickered across her face. This was no longer about rules or mailboxes. This was about accountability and consequences, and she realized the cameras now included her in the story. Karen's energy shifted from fury to fear. Her own position as a self-appointed enforcer of neighborhood rules suddenly felt precarious. She knew all eyes were on her. She could see in the neighbors' expressions a mix of satisfaction, curiosity, and even schadenfreude. The officers loaded the HOA president into the patrol car. Flashing lights reflected off the windows, creating a cinematic glow on the street. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, some whispering, some openly cheering. Karen attempted to regain control, raising her voice. "I demand to know why he's being arrested." One officer shook her head. "Ma'am, this isn't about you." Karen's fury bubbled. "But it is. I've been following rules. I've been reporting violations." I realized then the poetic irony. Karen had spent years trying to control everyone else, yet now her obsession with authority had left her powerless, exposed and humiliated in front of her neighbors. The HOA president looked back from the patrol car, his expression a mix of embarrassment and resignation. For the first time, the aura of authority he had cultivated crumbled in the eyes of the community. As the patrol car pulled away, Karen's phone rang again. She answered reluctantly. The voice on the other end said, "It's your turn." Karen's legs shook as she listened to the mysterious caller. She ended the call abruptly and sank onto the curb, looking defeated. I approached cautiously. "Karen, what's going on?" She glanced at me with wide eyes. They said I'm next." "Next for what?" I swallowed nervously. I don't know. Maybe it's about the HOA? Her face turned pale. They know everything. My complaints, my records, all of it. They're coming for me. The officers returned, walking past her to clear the crowd. One officer whispered something to me. Stay calm. She's just realizing that her obsession with enforcing HOA rules may have made her own position illegal in some ways. Karen scrambled to her feet, eyes darting to the neighbors. She realized that her long-standing reign of petty enforcement, intimidation, and surveillance was now being scrutinized, and people were watching. Suddenly, a squad car pulled up behind Karen. 2 officers stepped out, holding paperwork. Karen Thompson? One asked. Her jaw dropped. What? You are being summoned for questioning regarding HOA records, false reporting, and harassment complaints, the officer said firmly. Karen stumbled backward, her composure shattered. The crowd gasped. She had gone from self-assured enforcer to public spectacle in a matter of minutes. Karen's scream echoed through the neighborhood. No! This can't be happening. Karen stood frozen as the officers read her rights. Her face turned red, a mix of anger, embarrassment, and disbelief. Neighbors whispered, some filming, some shaking their heads. I was just enforcing rules, she stammered. One officer shook their head. Ma'am, enforcement doesn't justify harassment or falsifying complaints. The patrol car's lights reflected on the suburban homes, golden hour casting long, dramatic shadows. Karen's authority, carefully built over years, crumbled before everyone watching. I watched silently. Part of me felt sympathy, but mostly it was surreal. Karen's obsession with control had trapped her, and now she faced the consequences. The crowd's whispers grew. Did you see her face? All those complaints, now it's her turn. Even as she was escorted to the patrol car, Karen's defiance didn't completely fade. You'll regret this. I'll have the HOA rules on you, she yelled. The officer ignored her, guiding her to the car. I realized then how quickly power can shift in a suburban drama. One moment you're untouchable, the next you're the story everyone is talking about. Mini cliffhanger. As Karen was loaded into the patrol car, she spun and pointed at me screaming, "You'll pay for this." Block 7 visual prompt. Cinematic, photorealistic suburban street. Karen, 50s, floral blouse, in handcuffs, officers guiding her to patrol car. Homeowner, 30s, standing on porch, neighbors filming. Golden hour shadows, dramatic tension. Block 8, community shock. The street fell silent once Karen was taken away. Neighbors exchanged looks of disbelief, some whispering congratulations, some shaking their heads. I stepped onto my porch, still processing what had just happened. The HOA president, once untouchable, was arrested. Karen, the self-proclaimed enforcer, was next. The neighborhood had never seen anything like it. One neighbor approached. I can't believe it. Karen and the president, both in trouble. Who would have thought? I shrugged. Power shifts fast when the law catches up with people. News crews began arriving, drawn by the spectacle. Cameras rolled, neighbors narrated what had happened, and I realized the entire block was now a viral story waiting to happen. Suddenly my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number read, "Check your mailbox, carefully." I approached the mailbox slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. The street had quieted somewhat, but the tension lingered like a static charge in the air. Neighbors were still peering out from behind curtains and fences, their whispers weaving through the quiet hum of the suburban evening. My heart raced, a mix of anticipation and unease. Something about the day felt larger than life, almost surreal, like I'd stumbled into a suburban thriller where the smallest actions had the potential to shift power entirely. The mailbox, usually an innocuous square of metal cemented into the grass, now felt like the epicenter of secrets. I lifted the lid carefully, bracing myself for whatever might be inside. There it was, a thick, manila envelope heavy in my hands. The official markings immediately told me this was no ordinary piece of mail. My fingers trembled slightly as I tugged it open, revealing stacks of documents, spreadsheets, and letters. Each page was meticulously organized, evidence of HOA financial mismanagement, improperly approved expenditures, and falsified records. The weight of it wasn't just physical, it was moral and emotional, a confirmation that the chaos unfolding around me had a concrete, undeniable basis. As I skimmed the first few pages, my eyes widened. Line after line revealed irregularities, including large sums of money misappropriated from the HOA account and manipulated reports designed to conceal misconduct. Even more astonishing were the details that implicated Karen directly. Her repeated complaints, her obsessive insistence on minor infractions, and her campaign of intimidation had all left a digital and paper trail that exposed her recklessness. Her enforcement had crossed the line into harassment and falsification. She had built a fortress of control, only to have it crumble under the weight of her own obsessive behavior. I leaned against the mailbox post, absorbing the gravity of what I held. 4 months, Karen had dominated neighborhood discourse, her complaints escalating minor issues into police reports, HOA meetings, and neighborhood-wide gossip. The HOA president, once untouchable, had been her supposed ally in authority, and together, they had created an environment of fear and compliance. Yet now, the documents in my hands revealed that both of them had been operating far outside the bounds of accountability. Mismanagement, manipulation, and false reports. They had woven a complex web of control, and it was now unraveling in the harsh light of truth. I looked up, scanning the street. The sun had dipped lower, casting long, cinematic shadows across lawns and sidewalks. Neighbors were cautiously emerging from their homes, some filming on their phones, others whispering to each other, the curiosity palpable. Even the police lingered nearby, their presence a reminder that what had begun as a petty neighborhood squabble had escalated into legal consequences for multiple parties. The entire street felt suspended in a moment of surreal, high-stakes drama. I carefully set the envelope down on the mailbox, hesitating to touch it again until I was sure how to proceed. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me. This wasn't just evidence of mismanagement. It was proof that the very people who had attempted to control and intimidate others were now exposed. Karen's obsessive enforcement of rules, her repeated calls to the police over minor disputes, and the HOA president's hidden financial misconduct were all converging into a single, undeniable narrative. Their power, once absolute, was no longer untouchable. I stepped back from the mailbox, my gaze drifting across the street, when a sudden shout broke my reverie. "Did you see who just arrived?" a neighbor called out, pointing toward the end of the block. I followed the motion of her hand and felt a jolt of anticipation shoot through me. A black SUV was rolling down the street slowly, its tinted windows glinting in the fading light. The vehicle moved deliberately, almost purposefully, and for a moment the entire neighborhood seemed to pause. The SUV's presence changed the atmosphere immediately. Suburban normalcy, already fragile, was now overtaken by tension and curiosity. The tinted windows hid its occupants, creating a sense of mystery that made every neighbor lean forward, phones raised, whispers rippling down the block. Who was inside? Law enforcement? Investigators? Media? Or someone else entirely? I felt a shiver run down my spine. The timing was too precise, too deliberate. Everything that had unfolded today, the chaos with Karen, the HOA president's arrest, the neighbors' astonishment, was now intersecting with this new arrival. The street, normally so predictable, had become a stage where every movement carried weight, every shadow seemed pregnant with possibility. Karen, from where she was being escorted toward the patrol car by officers, noticed the SUV too. Her eyes widened behind the standard-issued cuffs and jumpsuit, and for the first time she seemed uncertain, genuinely vulnerable. The defiance and fury that had defined her earlier confrontations were replaced by something else: fear. A creeping, almost paralyzing uncertainty as the unknown approached. The HOA president, seated in the patrol car, looked toward the SUV as well. His expression shifted from stoic resignation to wary curiosity. Even he, accustomed to orchestrating power and control, seemed caught off guard by this development. The black SUV, slowly advancing down the suburban street, had introduced a new variable, an unknown that threatened to shift the narrative once again. Neighbors pressed closer to fences and windows, some whispering frantic speculation, others filming silently, capturing every second. Phones tilted at awkward angles recorded the approaching vehicle, the flashing police lights reflecting off the SUV's glossy surface. The combination of fading daylight, tension-charged air, and curious spectators gave the moment an almost cinematic quality, like the climax of a drama that had been building all day. I could feel the collective breath of the street holding, waiting, suspended in anticipation. Every instinct told me that this arrival was significant, that the events of the day were about to take another dramatic turn. The mailbox in my hands, the envelope of proof, the exposed HOA president, and the subdued, shocked Karen, all of it seemed to converge in this single charged moment. The SUV slowed to a stop in front of my house. Its engine hummed softly, the quiet punctuating the tension. The tinted windows began to lower, revealing occupants that were still partially hidden, shadowed by the fading sun. The air felt electric, neighbors leaning forward, whispering questions no one yet had answers to. Who were these people? Why were they here? And what did their arrival mean for the unraveling drama of the day? Even as I watched, my mind raced through possibilities. Could they be federal investigators? Journalists? Or perhaps legal authorities arriving to corroborate the documents I had just found? The sense of suspense was overwhelming, yet there was a strange thrill in knowing that the story, which had seemed confined to petty HOA disputes, had expanded into something larger, almost epic in its suburban scale. The SUV finally came to a complete stop. The engine cut off. Silence descended across the street. The neighbors' phones were held high, cameras focused, breaths held. The moment stretched, taut and unbroken, as if the suburban world had paused entirely to witness what would unfold next. And then, the first shadowed figure emerged from the vehicle, stepping toward the house, the fading sunlight glinting off a badge, or perhaps a piece of official identification, hinting at authority, power, and consequence. The day that had begun with petty disputes over mailboxes and HOA rules was about to reach a conclusion none of us could have anticipated. I took a step back, gripping the mailbox tightly, and whispered to myself, heart hammering, "Who are they, and what do they want from us?" The black SUV had pulled up slowly at the end of the street, its tinted windows glinting in the fading light. Out stepped a small group of legal investigators holding folders, clipboards, and laptops, their presence immediately commanding attention. They moved with purpose, clearly here to review the HOA records, to untangle years of mismanagement, falsified complaints, and petty vendettas. It was almost surreal, the quiet suburban street where children had ridden bicycles just hours earlier, now hosting a cinematic tableau of law enforcement, investigators, and curious neighbors. Karen had already been escorted away, her floral blouse replaced by the standard orange jail-issued jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her as the officers guided her toward the waiting patrol car. The expression on her face had shifted from the ferocity she always carried to raw, unfiltered disbelief. For years she had wielded rules like weapons, intimidating neighbors and policing petty infractions. Now, the very law she had believed would serve her had turned against her. The irony was not lost on anyone watching. Meanwhile, the HOA president remained in custody as well. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, and his hair disheveled, a visual testament to how quickly authority can crumble when accountability arrives. For years, he had seemed untouchable, orchestrating neighborhood operations with a quiet, self-assured confidence. But behind closed doors, he had committed acts that crossed legal and ethical boundaries. Fraud, misuse of HOA funds, and intentional concealment of safety violations were just the tip of the iceberg. Today, all of it had come to light, and the suburban world he had controlled so carefully had collapsed around him. As I stood on my porch, a mild breeze brushing across my face, I took in the scene. Neighbors had slowly begun to disperse, some lingering on their driveways, still whispering, still filming on their phones. Conversations buzzed with disbelief, amusement, and even a sense of justice served. "Did you see her face?" one neighbor muttered. "I've never seen Karen like that before." Another whispered, "The president, handcuffed? Who would have thought?" I realized then that suburban life had a hidden volatility. On the surface, it appeared peaceful, orderly, and predictable. Lawns were mowed, mailboxes were painted to spec, children played in the streets. But beneath it all, obsession with control, power, and fear could erupt into chaos in the blink of an eye. It was a lesson not just for Karen or the HOA president, but for the entire community. Karen's downfall, while dramatic, was instructive. Her fixation on enforcing minor rules, her willingness to escalate every small violation into a police matter, and her belief that she alone could dictate community standards had left her blind to her own legal exposure. Every time she reported a neighbor or policed someone's mailbox, she created a paper trail, evidence that investigators could and would follow. And follow they had. In a twist of poetic justice, her obsession with control, which had allowed her to dominate so many interactions over the years, became the very reason she now faced consequences. The HOA president's situation was equally revealing. He had projected calm authority, a steady hand in neighborhood affairs, but his behind-the-scenes decisions had been far from benign. Mismanagement of HOA funds, falsified meeting minutes, and neglect of safety responsibilities had all gone unnoticed for years. Today, those missteps were no longer abstract problems, they were legal violations with tangible consequences. Watching him escorted into the patrol car, I realized just how fragile authority can be when it is built on appearances rather than accountability. As the investigators began sifting through the records, neighbors continued to observe from their porches and windows. There was a quiet satisfaction in the air, a collective acknowledgement that justice had finally arrived, not in a slow, bureaucratic way but dramatically, visibly, and publicly. The street had become a stage, a suburban theater where the long-hidden truths of power, obsession, and misconduct were revealed to all. I reflected on my own role in the events. Though I had not initiated the investigations, I had witnessed them unfold in real time, and my calm, measured responses had perhaps contributed to the clarity of the situation. By following the rules, by maintaining transparency, and by refusing to escalate conflicts, I had positioned myself not as an aggressor, but as a reliable observer of justice in action. In a neighborhood filled with petty quarrels and blurred lines of authority, that distinction made all the difference. The cameras that neighbors had pulled out to record the chaos continued to capture every moment. In the age of social media, these incidents were no longer private, they became lessons, cautionary tales, and, in some cases, sources of viral entertainment. Yet beyond the spectacle, there was a deeper lesson. Power and obsession, when divorced from ethics and accountability, can lead to downfall. Whether it was Karen's fixation on enforcement or the HOA president's manipulation of authority, both had underestimated the reach of truth and law. As daylight began to fade, the street returned to a semblance of normalcy. Law enforcement prepared to leave, investigators packed their files, and neighbors slowly retreated indoors, still buzzing with conversation. Yet the story of the day would linger in the community's collective memory for months, if not years. People would talk about the day the HOA president went to jail, the day Karen realized that power without accountability could unravel everything. It would become a reference point in neighborhood lore, a story shared over fences and at block parties, a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession and overreach. I took one last look at the empty street, the patrol cars pulling away, and the distant flash of red and blue lights fading into the evening sky. Life in suburbia often seems predictable, safe, and mundane. But today had proven otherwise. The balance between order and chaos, authority and accountability, civility and obsession, had been disrupted, and in that disruption clarity emerged. Rules mattered. Ethics mattered. And sometimes justice arrived in ways no one anticipated. Finally, I turned to the camera, knowing this story was not just my own, but a lesson for anyone who would listen. What would you do if your neighbor, or your HOA leader, turned the law against you? I asked. Would you fight, comply, or wait and watch? Think about it. Because in communities everywhere, power can shift in an instant, and the consequences can be dramatic, public, and unforgettable. I smiled slightly, shaking my head at the surreal events of the day. Remember, I continued, respect the rules, respect the people around you, and never let obsession with control blind you. Suburban life may seem calm, but the reality is often much more complicated, and justice has a way of showing up when you least expect it. As I stepped back into my house, the golden light of evening fading into deep purple shadows, I felt a sense of closure. Karen, the HOA president, the neighbors, and I, all had been players in a story that reminded everyone how fragile authority truly is, and how quickly the scales can tip. Suburbia had returned to quiet, but its lessons lingered, etched into the minds of all who had witnessed the drama. And with that, I knew this wasn't just a story for the neighborhood, it was a story for anyone living under the quiet illusion of normalcy, a story that would be retold for its lessons, its drama, and its reflection of the human tendency to crave control and underestimate accountability. What would you do if your neighbor or HOA leader turned the law against you? Share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe for more dramatic suburban stories.